I'd like briefly to cover the key points of the white paper. From my perspective as a planner, being in the planning profession for 35 years, obviously the big issue I see here is that the white paper does not deal with any strategic issues. There is no strategic plan making, which is a huge missed opportunity. We do not have a national strategic land use plan. We don't have a plan that directs resources to those areas of the country where they need them. We don't have a plan that actually seeks to remodel the UK to make it fit for purpose for the 2050s and our zero carbon economy. So at the strategic level, this white paper misses a massive trick. And really, it's a very poor piece of a white paper. Not only does it miss the strategic and the regional, it is a very localized, local type of approach. And therefore, it is weak in that respect. Now, let's look at the key points it's trying to make. It's trying to speed up the plan making. Well, we've had that now for the last 40 years, been trying to speed up plan making. The 2004 planning legislation was a dog's dinner. That slowed everything up. Things did improve, but it is still very poor. Now, they're going to make a whole new set of local plans, and they're supposed to take 30 months. Now, that's not going to kick in until at least 2023, and that's after this legislation has got through all the Houses of Parliament. So I wouldn't expect any change or any real engagement with this white paper and the aims of this white paper for 4 to 5 years. So if anybody's expecting change rapidly, it isn't coming. And the second point I would make, and I disagree with Philip on this is not a radical review of the planning system because all the major players are left in place. Planning authorities are still there, the planning inspectorate's still there, all the key players are there. And therefore, this isn't radical. This is sort of a bit of a missed opportunity again. If the government want to be radical, then they're not being radical. So I think on that ground, I would strongly disagree. And moving on, so the white paper looks to speed up plan making, increase housing supply. Well, without substantial public house building, that's never really going to happen. And that was always the big area that this government will not address, is the provision of decent quality social housing. And until they get to grips with that, then housing supply will always be constrained. And then it looks to revive engagement on local design and placemaking. That's all fine and dandy, but where's the strategic? Where are the big issues? How are we going to address, where we place major pieces of infrastructure? How do we design a national set of infrastructure priorities? None of that will be covered by this white paper. Now, we talk about localism and local plan making, but there's going to be increased national control of planning policies, increased national control over housing numbers, and national control over housing standards. Whilst I would strongly recommend control over housing standards, numbers and control over planning policies really takes a lot of the local away from local authorities and local people. We're going to have a new replacement of Section 106 in SIL with a new infrastructure fund, which we paid at the end of development. Now, and local authorities will have to sort of find the funds first, borrow those, and then give those, and then receive those back from the developer. But of course, the developer goes bust at the end of a process. So I wonder where that money is going to come from. So I think there's some issues with that. So I think that this paper has many areas that it misses. And one of the other things it does in defining growth areas, renewal areas, and protected areas is seek to reduce the amount of public participation there is in the planning process. And I think that will be a difficult area. Now, outline permission may be automatic in growth areas, but reserve matters will still, I believe, be subject to planning applications or a form of prior notification. Of course, if that is the case, then those seeking to prevent development will still have their opportunity to do so. However, the principle of development will not be something which can be challenged. It'll be very interesting to see where that takes us. We have a prior approval process proposed for renewal areas and then planning permission for protected areas. And going back to you, Philip, you talk about freeing the system up. This idea of protected areas could be an absolute devil in the detail, because all those nice areas and all those countryside areas that people want to protect will mean that many local authorities may be 90–95% protected area. And therefore, we may find ourselves with more controls rather than less in those areas that perhaps people would want to build. So I think this paper does run a lot of problems. One of the issues why planning is the focus for other legislation is that the planning process is one of the few areas that captures development before it happens. And therefore it is used by those in ecology, those involved in building and other matters associated, other legislation, health and safety with building and construction. They use the planning process in order to have some control over what's going on. So the planning system becomes a proxy for other people's interests. And that's been a problem because those other interests are not served by their own legislation. So the planning system becomes that proxy. And I think people often forget that. And when I used to work for the Environment Agency, they always used the planning system to try and exert control. It used to annoy me because they had their own legislation, but they didn't want to use it. And I've seen that happen in many, many ways. So wrapping this up, I think planning for the future is a limited approach to the planning system. It is not radical. I think that it misses a major opportunity that it should have taken. And I think that it reflects the concerns of a privileged few in the main. And I don't think it will deliver the proper planning system that we're seeking.